Mr. Kenney, through his translator, we understand that you are an expert on so-called human rights. Can you please explain to me, what are these human rights? Yes, I was as shocked as some of you are.
People can protest if they respect physical distancing guidelines. His government expects law enforcement to exercise common sense in respecting both fundamental rights to peaceful protest and protecting public health.
Constituents want them to defend their livelihoods and freedoms as Albertans, and that they do not support the latest round of restrictions.
We live in a vibrant parliamentary democracy where people have a diverse range of views. We believe that we have approximately 1 month's supply of N95 masks.
The masks that we were getting were actually quite different than the ones they were accustomed to, and really were of substandard quality, and in fact, in my opinion, dangerous.
Now, I know many Albertans are looking around at states like Florida and Texas. People are wondering why we can't just do what they're doing. If our federal government didn't put Canada at the back of the line for buying vaccines, we'd be where they are in those U.S. states.
Is it true that in the contracts, provinces are not allowed to buy directly?
Mercedes, no, it's not.
But in this province, it's also rodeo day. No masks, no social distancing, no sense that this might be dangerous.
Apparently, they don't care about COVID. And apparently they don't care about the sacrifices that millions of Albertans are making every single day.
He won't reveal who else was out of the country, but today the Premier partly blamed himself.
It was a significant error in judgment.
Phillips used social media to make it seem like he was at home.
A very Merry Christmas.
There is no public health order or legal barrier barring them from doing so. I don't think it's reasonable for me as a leader to sanction people. Apparently they don't care or are somehow choosing to ignore the hundreds of their fellow Albertans in hospital and intensive care beds right now.
Appearing to break their own COVID regulations, depending on how you look at it and how much of a stickler you are, and these people are sticklers. They're sitting on a private patio in a building pejoratively known as the Sky Palace.
We were seeing significant increases in people who were reporting mental health challenges, increases in anxiety and depression.
Seeing changes over the months that we've done our study, we're seeing, and most of it is going in the wrong direction.
That number had risen to more than 20%, or about 1 in 5.
COVID killed my son, but not in the way you think. And I do believe that.
Spencer Smith left a note for his parents, writing about feeling locked in the house and growing apart from his friends.
Chris Buckner, however, says he believes suicide is a bigger risk to many kids than COVID-19.
From a suicide prevention perspective, it is troubling that the most important public health approach for the COVID-19 epidemic is social distancing.
And you said he's not breathing at this time?
He's not breathing.
Tell me exactly what happened.
He's going to hurt himself. Give him CPR. Not breathing.
We need to support Albertans' whole health, which means managing the spread of COVID and making sure that the restrictions don't go farther than they need to.
We are in uncharted water when it comes to overdose. We have never lost as many people to overdose.
Alberta's Premier believes policies aimed at reducing the spread of COVID-19 are to blame.
The government suspended the operation of residential treatment centers and then reduced the number of people who could stay within them.
We've said from the beginning that obviously provinces are sovereign orders of government.
Data is preliminary, but so far we have not seen an increase in the number of suicides when compared with previous years.
There's an immense fear about who's next right now. Everybody's walking on pins and needles.
You don't even want to open up your Facebook feed some days because you're going to see, you know what, there's another one today. There's another one today. And then it's who is it, what happened.
I believe that this is a complex issue, that it is not just about imposition of public health measures or not, but of course it's multifactorial.
The mask doesn't actually substantially reduce your chances of getting infected.
The current enforcement is, to put it lightly, a bit of a joke.
I got a deal on the horse. They gave me a $100 ticket. And you know, I never thought I'd live to see the day that you couldn't ride a horse in Calgary.
Insisting that Pastor James Coates remain behind bars in the maximum security Edmonton Remand Centre.
Scott spent 3 days in jail for refusing to go broke and protesting the lockdown by holding a 1,500-person strong protest at his recently chained-up restaurant.
The Global News cameras have
seen people hugging outside of the church.
The first and primordial right is the right to freedom of conscience and religion, because it is through these rights that we define our deepest commitments and who we are.
AHS is confirming that it has blocked access to the church by putting fencing around. RCMP are also on scene here.
It was to send a message. You better stop criticizing the government of Alberta.
To avoid the government, they've gone completely underground.
But God is sovereign. And government needs to stay in its God-ordained lane.
It seems to me that theology is more of something that comes in after the fact to legitimize what are basically political and financial reasons.
And if we counter social distancing with exponential kindness, we may just bring the light someone needs during this difficult time.
Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church has spent time behind bars as well recently.
But it would be really interesting to dig into how things are turning out financially in the church right now.
This notion that all rights are indivisible and equal, and therefore we cannot prioritize any, is manifestly false.
Mayor Dina Hinshaw told the West Block he believes this is not the time for politics or figuring out who's to blame, but rather to focus on flattening the curve.
While shutting down thousands and thousands of retail, small and medium-sized businesses.
People need to eat. So it's very paternalistic to suggest that people who might not be following restrictions are doing so from a place of just sort of like bourgeois contempt.
There needs to be a crackdown, and this cannot be tolerated if we're to be successful.
I know the current restrictions are very difficult for many Albertans, including business owners.
Those people at those anti-mask protests, let's not kid ourselves, they're not people who need to eat.
Rural Alberta eateries have opened in protest too. Even mayors for Lac La Biche and Bonnyville have joined the defiance to sit down for a meal.
Decisions that are being taken to open in contravention of the orders are not in the best interests of our communities.
Restaurants Canada does not support businesses opening in defiance of health orders, but it also says it's not surprised to see owners desperate to stay open.
Our numbers indicate that the restrictions we put in place last month, while extremely challenging, are helping to prevent more people from being exposed and getting sick.
So it's all been thrown out and we are allowed to go back to work.
Ms. Klein has been recharged with the same 2 offenses that were previously withdrawn by the Crown.
And the police are claiming it was a, quote, clerical error. Oh, okay.
They are people who are marching in thinly veiled white nationalist, supremacist, anti-government protests.
I spoke with the Canadian Muslim Research think tank this morning, and they called Kenney's remarks a clear demonstration of systemic and direct racism.
It's increasingly clear that many involved in these protests are unhinged conspiracy theorists.
They're against Trudeau. They're literally against everything. So I'm like, why are they here? Why do they live in Canada?
If we lose everything else, then what is a $2,000 ticket worth? If you lose your freedom, what do you have?
We have, businesses that are dying, and they're dying for no good reason. This is not an emergency situation.
Premier Jason Kenney says the event was attended by members of known extremist groups.
But the Force says the event unfolded largely peacefully and respectfully.
Some parents say mental health concerns are one of the main reasons for their rallies.
They've been told that it's racist, because the people who want to silence us know that's the best way.
And they don't deserve that kind of sympathy.
I don't even know if I can put a meal on the table if I followed the lockdowns.
So we have no other means to get cash, to get money except this one here.
Someday there will be a reckoning. Someday there will be an accounting.
Despite the progress we've made, there are just as many COVID patients in hospital today as there were on December 8th, the day that our current restrictions were first announced.
This government made, I think, a grave mistake in the spring when we made, frankly, I think a stupidly arbitrary distinction between essential and non-essential retail businesses.
We understand that you are an expert on so-called human rights. Can you please explain to me, what are these human rights? Yes, I was as shocked as some of you are.